How are we tonight, guys? Tonight, we're getting nice and cozy with a book. I've actually met the author of this book a few times now, and his family as well, because his family helps him out. His name's Ben Wolf. This is the origin story of Ben Wolf, straight from his site. He is so imaginative. I absolutely love this introduction. So, who is Ben Wolf? The origin story. At the age of 9, Ben Wolf slayed his first dragon. As the dragon perished, it bequeathed a measure of its power to Ben. It told him, "You now have the ability to lie more creatively than any other being on this planet, except for politicians. Use this power wisely." The dragon died with one final puff of smoke from its lungs, but Ben Wolf lived on. For years, Ben honed his craft. At the age of 12, he lied to his sister about having thrown darts at a poster of her favorite boy band. At the age of 16, he lied to a policeman who'd pulled him over for speeding, and it got him out of a ticket. At the age of 18, he lied to himself about what a good decision it was to go to Bible college and major in pastoral studies. That one has come back to haunt him several times. Given the unique power he'd inherited from the dying dragon, Ben Wolf had expected his life to look very different from how it did when he turned 23. Then the dragon's words regarding his power returned to him. Use this power wisely. The truth was, Ben hadn't been using the magnificent power wisely. He'd been using it for personal gain and to dig himself out of bad situations. Or in the case of Bible college, to get himself into them. So he asked himself, what would be a wise way to use this power? At that very moment, a bus drove past the street in front of him. On its side was emblazoned the phrase, "You should write a novel." Having graduated from Bible college a year earlier, Ben took it as a divine message. What's more, he'd already written one novel at that point, and he'd enjoyed it, so he figured he might as well write a few more. That was 2009. Now, more than 10 years later, Ben has written north of 10 books, including an award-winning children's book and an award-winning novel. Awards are great, but what Ben has found even more reassuring is the consistently great feedback he's gotten from readers. They've raved about his work and told him he was the best, most creative liar they'd ever heard of. And wherever that dragon is, you can be sure it is pleased with how Ben has utilized the final gift it bestowed upon him. Or dragons don't go in any sort of afterlife, and it's dead and has no opinion. Creative introduction, creative guy. Let's dive in to a creative book. If you'd like to check out Ben Wolf's website, it is simply benwolf.com. Tonight we're going to be reading his Blood Mercenaries Origins, and this is a precursor to his series. The introduction for Blood Mercenaries. 4 dangerous mercenaries, 4 exciting missions, 4 page-turning novellas that lead into an epic series. Blood Mercenaries Origins shares the origin stories of the 4 legendary heroes in the epic Blood Mercenaries sorcery series. Your journey begins with Aaron Ironglade and his wyvern, Wafer. When Aaron Ironglade gets kicked out of the army for his addiction to pain-killing magic mushrooms, he is forced to leave Wafer, his battle mount wyvern, behind. They've shared a bond since Wafer hatched, and Aaron vows to get him back someday. Without Wafer, Aaron will never truly be complete. But Aaron's former commander, Larkus Brove, is holding a grudge, and he also controls Wafer's fate. Brove works to stop Aaron and Wafer from reuniting at every turn. With no money, a dead-end job, and a hopeless future, Aaron decides to rescue Wafer from Brove's clutches, even if it means risking his life. Here we go. Let's dive in, guys. Chapter 1. The heavy bronze doors slammed shut in Aaron Ironglade's face. ending his 16-year career with the Galvanian army and locking his best friend inside. He shifted his footing, and a small pouch of gold and silver coins, stamped with the Emperor's head, jingled on his hip. Half the amount it should have been. "Goodbye, Wafer," he muttered, and rubbed his aching back. "It's been real." He started down the path, towards Galveston, and the capital city of the realm of Galvalia, but his bond with Wafer, the wyvern mount he'd raised from birth, thrummed in his chest. He stopped and turned back. The high fortress walls loomed above him, mocking his failure and keeping him separated from his mount. "I'll see you again, buddy. I promise I'll find a way to get you back." As he walked away from the fortress, the bond dulled and dulled until he felt nothing but remorse and sadness. With each successive step, his anxiety burdened, and he wanted to turn back, but instead he kept walking. Even if he had turned back, it wouldn't have mattered. Aaron's journey back to Galveston led him through rolling green hills marked with sporadic trees. He soon reached the town of Dryernoth, the nearest settlement to the fortress and a regular haunt for members of the Galvanian army due to its proximity. Normally, Aaron could make the trip in 3 minutes or less thanks to Wafer's wings. But today, his boots had gotten him there in about 15 minutes, and already his lower back pain had reignited. He rubbed it as he walked into town, and passed a stable for horses, a pub, and a brothel, all of which catered specifically to soldiers. The idea of a drink and a rub-down sounded great, but Aaron needed something stronger, something he'd grown accustomed to over the last few months since he'd sustained his injury. And the local apothecary shop undoubtedly had what he needed. They always did. A handful of people bustled through the town's dusty streets, but at midday in the middle of the week, most were tending to their shops and businesses in preparation for the nightly influx of off-duty soldiers and the even larger weekend crowds. Aaron sighed. He'd missed the camaraderie he'd shared with some of his unit. It bothered him to know he'd never be a part of that world again. But the lack of a connection to Wafer grated on him even more. He felt empty, powerless, and alone. And he was. "Come down from there," a tiny voice chirped to his left. Aaron turned and saw a little girl staring up at one of the few trees in the town square. Her hair color ranged somewhere between blonde and light brown, and she was probably 7 or 8 years old. In the tree above her, among the branches of orange leaves preparing to drop for the winter, sat a fluffy white cat. "I said come down," the girl repeated. She glanced around at some of the people walking by, but none of them moved to help her. Aaron shook his head. That cat is not gonna come down on its own. Then the girl's blue eyes locked onto his. "'Scuse me, mister." Aaron cursed to himself. He never should have made eye contact. "You're a soldier, right?" she asked. "Not anymore, kid." He waved at her. "Sorry, Can you please help me get my cat out of the tree? He's not allowed to be up there." When Aaron didn't stop walking, the girl said, "Aren't soldiers supposed to help us?" Aaron hesitated, and his steps stalled. He may not have been a soldier anymore, but that wasn't any real excuse not to help. Then the pain in his back flared and deepened as he stopped walking. That was a reason not to get involved. He started rubbing the spot in his lower back again. "Look, kid, I'm Everly. That's my name," the girl said as she started towards him. "Everly," Aaron corrected himself. He held up his hands. "I'm on my way to the apothecary to buy some—" "It'll just take a second. I'm not tall enough to reach it." She took hold of one of his hands and started tugging on it. She repeated, "It'll just take a second." Aaron exhaled a sharp breath. He knew where this kid was coming from, all too well. She clearly cared for the cat. She ached for it, just like he ached from being away from Wafer. As far as he knew, humans couldn't form the kind of bond with any other animal that he'd attained with Wafer, but it didn't mean Everly loved that cat any less. This cat was probably her best friend, and this tree had unfairly separated them. So how could he refuse? He may not be a soldier anymore, but he could still be a decent person. "All right," he said. "Fine." The tree had no branches low enough for Everly to reach, so she could climb up after the cat. And even if she could have gotten up there, getting down with a big ball of fur in her small arms would be risky, if not outright dangerous. And fortunately for Aaron, the cat was on a branch low enough that Aaron could just reach up and grab him. But as he raised his arms to take hold of the cat, the pain in his back spasmed, and he yelped. "Oh!" The cat issued a low growl, and it darted along the branch and jumped onto an even higher branch. Everly gasped. "What happened? Why did you do that?" "Sorry," Aaron rubbed his back with both hands. "My back. It's... You scared him!" "I didn't mean to," Aaron said. Tears pooled in the corners of Everly's eyes, and she whimpered. "Now how will I get him down?" "Where are this kid's parents?" Aaron crouched in front of her and cupped her shoulders. "It's all right, kid. Everly, I'll go up there and grab him. It's all right." She nodded and sniffed. "All right." Aaron stood and faced the tree, which loomed even taller over him now that he had to consider the whole thing instead of just its lowest branch. He muttered, "What did I just agree to?" If he'd had Wafer with him, he could have climbed onto Wafer's back and had Wafer lift him up. It might have scared the cat to death to see a gigantic reptilian predator like Wafer peering up at him through the leaves, but at least Aaron wouldn't have to climb. But he didn't have Wafer now. He had to make do with his own strength and ability. He quickly stretched out his back and his arms, trying to relieve some of the pain. Then he jumped, grabbed the lowest branch, and hauled himself into the tree. Aaron immediately realized what a terrible mistake he'd made. His back pain dug into his nerves, scraping against them and agonizing his every movement. He never should have volunteered in the first place. But now he was committed. And if he let go, he'd fall and hurt himself, even worse. So he worked his way to a sitting position on the branch and took a few deep breaths to try to calm his rebelling muscles. Gods, how many trees did I climb as a kid? And now I can barely get into this one. Getting old sucks. The cat lay on a branch above him, staring down at him with blue eyes the color of Everly's. Its paws hung over the branch, as if it were a rag someone had tossed into a tree, and it meowed at him. "I'm coming," Aaron grumbled to it. "Don't move, and don't you dare go any higher." All he'd wanted to do was get something for his pain and get back to his parents' house in Galveston. Tomorrow he'd start his new life doing whatever. One thing was for sure, he had no intention of rescuing cats for a living. He wove his thin body between the branches, resisting and ignoring the pain in his back, until he finally managed to reach the cat. It meowed at him again and nipped at his hand. "Hey!" Aaron snapped. "Cut that out. I'm trying to help you." "No biting, Cracker!" Everly called from below. Cracker? The cat's name was Cracker? And he had a wyvern named Wafer? Aaron shook his head. Weird coincidence. He managed to get Cracker by the scruff of his neck, and Aaron gently pulled him off the branch. Cracker loosed another low growl, and he squirmed a bit, flailing 4 paws tipped with sharp claws all around. but Aaron maintained control and slowly lowered him through the branches. "You can drop him," Everly said. "Cats land on their feet." "Yeah," Aaron grunted, "but I don't want to drop him from too high up." He repositioned himself on the lowest branch, took hold of another branch with his free hand, and carefully lowered the cat low enough that Everly could have caught him if she'd wanted to, but she wisely stayed back. "Good?" Aaron wheezed. "Yes!" Everly bounced on her toes. Aaron dropped Cracker, and he landed firmly on his feet. Then he promptly leapt into Everly's outstretched arms and muzzled her chin with his forehead. Despite his aching back, Aaron smiled. He knew that feeling, the sensation of a long-awaited reunion, and he reached out for the branch he'd been raking his back in the process. He somehow managed to land on his feet, but he immediately staggered back against the tree trunk and leaned on it for support. He exhaled, labored breaths, and clutched at his miserable back. His eyes clutched shut from the overwhelming pain. Aaron finally opened his eyes to the sound of giggles. There before him, Everly was spinning in a circle with her arms outstretched and with Cracker in her hands. Now he understood why the cat had jumped into the tree. Everly's spin stopped, and she wobble-walked towards Aaron with Cracker clutched to her chest. Breathless, she said, "Thank you so much." "My pleasure," Aaron lied. He groped at his back and winced as he dug his knuckles into his own flesh. "What's wrong with you?" Everly asked. "My back is messed up." "What happened to it?" Aaron closed his eyes again. He really didn't want to have to recount the whole story to an 8-year-old kid whom he'd likely never see again. He summarized. "A friend of mine was in trouble. I saved her." "Her?" Everly asked. "What's her name?" "Phelan." Now, she was something Aaron didn't mind recalling. He smirked at the thought of her bright blonde hair and her slightly pointed ears. Then his pain pulled him back into the present. "Anyway, I'm going to get something for the pain from the apothecary here in town. Glad your cat is safe." "The apothecary? Why didn't you say so?" Everly grinned at him. "He's my papa." In spite of his pain, Aaron smiled. Finally, some good news today. Aaron left Dranoth behind, along with a happy Everly, a grateful apothecary, and a cat named Cracker. He'd managed to purchase a sack of magic mushrooms from the apothecary for only 5 coins, a significant discount over what he would have otherwise paid for them. It was the apothecary's way of thanking Aaron for saving Cracker from the tree. One yellow spotted shroom, glowing blue from the magic infused into it, had deadened most of his pain and enabled him to keep walking towards Galveston, but he'd limited himself to just one for the time being. He didn't know when he'd be able to buy more, so he wanted to ration them. An hour later, Aaron reached the outskirts of Galveston and made his way through the city, passing ramshackle homes and fine stone residences alike as he headed to the only home he'd ever known outside of the fortress. Soon after, he stood before his parents' house. It looked the same as when he'd left, only 16 years worse. Graying, worn-out pine boards made up its 2-story exterior, secured with sturdy iron nails and brackets. A pair of windows hung open on the 2nd floor facing the street. The front door looked newer, though, probably a recent addition from within the last 5 years. It didn't look as wretched as the rest of the house, and it still retained a hint of its original pine color. Aaron exhaled a long breath. That house held a lot of memories for him, most of them sour. He looked down at his bag of shrooms and abandoned his rationing plans entirely. "There's no way I'm doing this sober." He dug his hand into his bag. What do you mean you were discharged? Pa folded his arms. Aaron shifted on the chair at their kitchen table, thankful the shrooms had started to relieve his back pain. They'd also cast his vision in an orange hue and made his body feel nearly weightless, a happy state to counter his father's grating interrogation. Pa pressed his weathered palms flat on the oak table, separating them, and leaned closer. I asked you a question, boy. Aaron scoffed. Boy? I'm not a boy anymore. A pinwheel of fiery colors ignited the gray wall behind his father, and Aaron cracked a smile. His anxiety had faded, virtually non-existent thanks to the shroom's effects. Something funny to you? Aaron's smile faded, and he shook his head. I don't owe you any explanation. You do if you mean to live under my roof again. Aaron glanced at his mother. The same range of colors spiraled slowly behind her. They made her look as radiant as she had the day he left. It's Mom's roof, too. Pa's eyebrows arched down, and he stood upright again. When she brings in the kind of coin I do on a daily basis, she'll have an equal say. Until then, I'm the rule of the law in this house. Make no mistake about that. Mom didn't look up from her embroidery, nor did she say anything. Aaron frowned. So much for the sympathy vote. The colors evolved, blending in touches of purple and pink, effects of the two shrooms he'd taken mixing together. He'd combined these types many times before, specifically for the effect now playing out in his vision, for the relief they gave his back, and for how well they quelled his anxiety. Gods, I am lit. Aaron fought off a smile. High as a spire. He could have climbed 10 trees and saved at least 40 cats feeling the way he was feeling now. Maybe 45. What in the third hell is wrong with you? Pa snapped his finger in front of Aaron's face, and sparks of bright green light flickered in and out to accompany the sound. You need to answer my question. Why did they discharge you? Your last letter said things were going well. Is it because of your injury? No, Aaron sighed. That was sort of the reason, but not entirely. His injury didn't bother him when he took the shrooms. Well, kind of. Pa just stared at him. It doesn't help my case that I have chronic back pain. But that's not the only reason I got discharged. More staring, more silence. I had a difference of opinion with my commanding officer, Aaron continued. He saw fit to use it as a reason to discharge me. It was true, broadly speaking. The colors morphed again, this time deepening from oranges into reds and browns. The effect was heightening. Normally, he'd take another shroom right about now, but he doubted it would fly with his parents in the room. You only got half your severance pay, Pa said. The Army only does that when the discharge happens under sour terms. Aaron glowered at him. How would you know? You never served. Pa's jaw tightened. No, but I've shod their horses and hammered out their armor, swords, and shields for the better part of 40 years. Pa pointed a calloused finger at Aaron. So don't try to play high and mighty with me, boy. Stop calling me that, Aaron grunted. Come again? I said, stop calling me that, Aaron repeated, louder. His voice sent the colors into a brief tizzy, then they resumed their calm flow. The effect calmed his emotions as well. I'm 31 years old, not a boy by any stretch of the imagination. His mom looked up at him with a hint of sadness and longing in her tired eyes. Then she returned to her embroidery. Paul leaned close to him, squinting. A wreath of earthy colors encircled his head. That, combined with the scowl on his face, made him look like a pissy old lion. "Are you?" he started. "Hi?" "What?" Aaron blinked and looked away. "No." "You are! You're high!" Pa huffed. "You come into my house hoping for a handout. I don't want a handout. And you're high as a cloud. What in the third hell are you thinking?" "Pa, no." Aaron looked at him again. "I would never." "Don't lie to me, boy. I can see it in your eyes, all bloodshot and glazed." Aaron blinked hard and stole a glance at his mom. His anxiety was building, but the shrooms kept pushing it back down. The push and pull made it hard to focus on what he wanted to say and how he wanted to say it. Mom's eyes held even more sadness now. She softly shook her head and frowned at him. Aaron couldn't keep looking at her. A pang of regret hit his stomach. He didn't want to see her cry. He didn't want to cry either. "Admit it," Pa growled. "You're on something." He turned back to Pa. "I'm just tired, Pa. It was a long walk from the fortress, and I didn't get much sleep last night. I'm tired." "Admit it, or I won't give you a thing. Not coin, not a job, not a place to stay." Mom said to Pa, "Fariko, that's—" "Not another word from you, wife," Pa snapped. "It's you he takes after." Mom's mouth clamped shut, and she resumed her embroidery with tears in her eyes. "Don't talk to her that way." Aaron had wanted to yell it, but the shrooms were inhibiting his will to be aggressive. "Don't change the subject." Pa's eyes narrowed. "You're high and I know it. We all do. So stop pretending you aren't. Admit it, or you're out of here right now." Aaron hesitated. He didn't want to let Pa win the argument, but he had to stay somewhere for the night. His family home was all he knew, all he could rely on. "Last chance." Aaron caved. I took something for my back pain." "I knew it. You blitzed little bastard." Pa shook his head. "This ends today." Aaron rolled his eyes. "Yeah, Pa. Your commands will just stop it altogether. They tried that in the army, and look how that ended up." "Here's the bottom line," Pa said. "If you mean to live here, you will pull your own weight. You'll work at my blacksmith shop without complaining. You'll pay room and board, and you'll do it all respectfully and without being high. Crystal?" "Forget this." Aaron pushed himself up. The room folded in on itself, then it reset. He'd seen it before when on shrooms, but it always tripped him out. The reds and browns had faded back to oranges, pinks and purples again. The shrooms' effects were beginning to fade. "You want to leave?" Pa snapped. "Shut the door behind you on your way out." "Go to hell, Pa." "Curse me all you want. Walk out that door, and you're never walking back in." Were it not for his mother, Aaron would have left right then and there. He could live without them both if he had to. He certainly had for the better part of the last 16 years. But never being able to see Mum again was a steep price. Something touched his hand. Soft, like the fur of a cat. He looked down. Mom held his hand in hers. Calluses and dry skin marked his fingers and hers, but she still felt soft and warm against him. Definitely the shrooms again. She squeezed his hand and the sensation calmed him. "Stay tonight," she said. "Decide in the morning." Aaron blinked, but the colors and the sensations remained. "No," Pa said. "He decides now, or he—" "Fariko," Mom hissed at him. "Enough." Now Pa went quiet. Mom turned back to Aaron. "What'll it be, Aaron?" I like this book so far. That's a little conflict to start off with, while still being kind of light and funny at the same time. I'm excited to see where this heads. Aaron woke up the next morning, in his old bed, totally sober and totally in pain. A pair of blue eyes stared down at him from a familiar round face, but one 16 years older than he'd remembered. He smiled, and so did his sister, Callie. "You're home," she said softly. Then she wrapped her arms around him and squeezed. His back pain heightened, and he yelped, "Ow!" Callie let him go and recoiled, her hands cupped together under her chin. "Oh, I'm so sorry. Mom told me, but I forgot." "It's fine." Aaron labored to get himself upright on the bed, wincing all the way. The fingertips of his right hand tingled with the numbness, and the muscles in his right forearm near his elbow ached. Two of the more recent side effects of his back pain. He looked Callie over. When he'd left, she was only 5. A surprise baby, 11 years after he'd been born. Now, she was a full-grown woman of 21, but with the same long blonde hair and absolutely stunning. She wore a blue dress that made her look like a princess. "You're all grown up," he said. "Yeah." She smiled again, her teeth white and bright, but not straight, just like Aaron and the rest of the family. "You were gone a long time." "Yeah, I was." "Pa told me what happened, about you being discharged." Aaron rubbed his eyes. "Don't believe everything you hear." She sat next to him. "So it's not true?" Aaron stopped and looked over at her. "It's complicated." "What about Wafer?" Memories of flying among the clouds on his wyvern's back surfaced in Aaron's mind. "They kept him. Wouldn't let me take him with, even though we're bonded. They're going to try to bond him with someone else, but it won't work. I've researched it. Best they can do is make him fly for an unbonded rider, and that won't go well." Callie nodded. "I don't know anything about it except that Mom read to me from your letters." "I feel empty now that I can't be around him. Like a part of me is missing." Aaron rubbed his back. "I want nothing more than to get him back, but I have no idea how I'd even do that." "I'm sorry. You're smart. You'll think of something." Callie put her hand on his shoulder. "Anyway, Mom sent me up here to fetch you for breakfast." "All right, I'll be down." Callie kissed his cheek, then left the room and closed the door behind her. Alone again, Aaron dug under his lumpy old mattress stuffed with ancient moose down, pulled out the sack of shrooms, and opened it. Despite being somewhat squished and flattened from hiding under the mattress all night, they glowed up at him with familiar faint blue light and a myriad of colored spots and stripes. As Aaron reached into the bag, Pa's threats echoed in his memory, and he hesitated. By the end of the day, Aaron had refamiliarized himself with his father's blacksmith shop, despite his claims 16 years prior that he would never return to it. Pa had done well in Aaron's absence. The shop had doubled in size thanks to the gradual growth of his business over time. But that just meant Aaron had twice as much to despise. His back was killing him. Blacksmithing made for hard labor, albeit with some craftsmanship involved, and his back couldn't tolerate it without the aid of painkillers, and he'd neglected to take any shrooms that morning out of a noble but foolish attempt at obedience to Pa's demands. And worst of all, nothing he did here would bring him any closer to getting Wafer back. He was just wasting time, performing the same mind-numbing tasks he'd done before he left to join the army 16 years earlier. After his day at the shop concluded, he headed back to his parents' house, headed straight up to his room, dug out the bag, and scarfed down 2 shrooms, one with yellow spots and one with purple stripes. Both irradiated with that familiar blue hue. Their effects hit him immediately. The yellow one dulled his back pain, and the purple one cast his vision in the same orange hue he'd enjoyed last night. The purple one also relaxed his body and soothed his anxieties. The color show was just a bonus. Aaron considered grabbing another shroom, one with green specks on its cap, to eat once the color show really got going, but he held off. He was already risking a lot by showing up to supper high again. "Aaron!" Mom called from downstairs. Aaron jumped and stuffed the sack under his mattress again, careful to make sure it wasn't sticking out. Then he draped his blanket over the edge just to be safe. "Yeah? Supper's on the table." The color show intensified and his back pain numbed. "Be right down." Aaron somehow managed to survive supper without Pa realizing he'd taken shrooms. Aaron retired early that evening, but right as he went to grab another shroom to help him get through the night, a knock sounded from his door. "It's me," Callie called. "Just wanted to say goodnight." Aaron abandoned his search and beckoned her inside. She shut the door behind her and sat on the bed next to him. Paul was right, wasn't he? Aaron swallowed. "About what?" "You're back. And how you deal with it?" Aaron sighed. Then he nodded. "Why do you take them?" "Callie," Aaron said, his voice low, "I wouldn't wish my back pain on you, or Mom, or even Pa. Ever since the accident, it's never been the same. I take the shrooms to manage. That's all I can hope for these days. I'll probably carry this ailment for the rest of my life, and I have to do something. Otherwise, I can't even function." She nodded. "I wish there were another way." "It's not illegal. It's not even immoral. Lots of people take them for far less noble reasons." She nodded again, staring at the floor. "I know. I just wish I knew of a way to help you permanently." The numbness in Aaron's fingertips prickled and he closed his hand into a fist. "Me too. Believe me, I'd rather I was whole." "So..." She paused. Then she looked up at him again. "What's it like?" "Magic mushrooms?" She tried to stifle a grin but failed. "Or chronic back pain?" She rolled her eyes. "The mushrooms, obviously." "It depends," Aaron replied. "There are lots of different kinds. Probably an endless number of combinations between enchantments and types of mushrooms. Aside from magical creatures and sentient races, mushrooms are one of the only other things capable of retaining magic. I know a little bit about it, but I'm by no means an expert." "Well, what happens to you?" "The ones I take dull my back pain and relax my body," Aaron said. "Not usually to the point of putting me to sleep, though those types of shrooms are out there. They're crazy potent, though, so I stay away from those. These ones do enough to get the muscles in my back to stop fighting whatever it is that's causing the pain. That combination is usually my preference." "Come on," Callie nudged him. "They do more than that. Why aren't you telling me?" Now Aaron fought to quell a smile, and he failed as miserably at it as she had. "I see vivid colors, and they change. Things kind of slow down, and I get sloppy and lazy, but in a good way." "Like at dinner tonight?" She elbowed his ribs lightly. Aaron grinned. "Do you think Pa noticed?" "No, and if he did, I know Mom told him to lay off you for it anyway." "And he listened?" "I guess we'll find out," she shrugged. I wouldn't recommend flaunting it in front of him, though. You never know what he'll do." "Believe me, I won't." "Well, I'm off to bed." Callie kissed his cheek and stood. "Hey, before you go, I've been meaning to ask you something." "Yeah?" "Are there any young men after you that I need to beat up?" Aaron asked. "I mean, I have all this combat training, I can't just let anyone near my pretty little sister. She smirked. With your back the way it is, you wouldn't be able to beat any of them up anyway. He tilted his head and eyed her. Hey, that's not nice. She giggled, and then it hit him. Wait, what do you mean by them? Good night, Aaron. She winked at him and slipped out of his room. She's too spunky for her own good. Aaron fetched a yellow-spotted mushroom from his sack, devoured it, and stashed the sack again. Then he eased himself down onto the bed, careful not to agitate his back, and he fell asleep. Morning came far too quickly, and fresh pain accompanied it. He took the yellow painkiller shroom alone. It didn't make him trip as hard, and he hoped it would be enough to keep him from hurting all day. Thinking better of it, he stashed a second one in a pocket for later. It didn't matter if it crumpled or broke, the effect would still be the same. The hours at the blacksmith dragged by, but at least Aaron managed to stay busy. The old skills he'd learned working alongside Pa for so many years came back quickly, with a few stern reminders on how Pa liked things done. Aaron had just started hammering on an iron shield when the sound of approaching hoofbeats caught his attention. He leaned to the side and glanced out of the nearest window. A green flag crested the hill in the distance, heading towards the blacksmith shop. It bore a golden insignia that Aaron couldn't make out from such a distance, but he knew what it was anyway. He'd worn it and served under it for 16 years. That was the sigil of Galvia and her armies. Human heads, then torsos, bounced into view as their horses trotted up the hill. All of them wore forest green armor, including their helmets. Aaron's heart pounded, and he worked to still it. He hadn't spent much time around the cavalry since his promotion to Wyvern Knight some 12 years before, so they likely wouldn't know or recognize him. He wouldn't have anything to be embarrassed about. Then he heard the shriek of a wyvern high above, distinct against the repeating hoofbeats and the harsh sounds of the blacksmith shop. Wing beats followed, growing ever closer, ever more ominous. Aaron both reveled in the familiar sound and knew its terror. His eyes widened, and he searched the skies. He saw nothing at first. Then a massive gray reptile landed on the street no more than 20 feet from the window with a thud. Townspeople scattered, and the wyvern spread its wings and hissed. He knew that wyvern. He'd seen it hundreds of times. Its name was Strife. The wyvern lowered its wings and its body, bracing its front half on the street surface with the knuckles atop its wings now folded inward. The knight atop the wyvern wore unique gray armor specially crafted for him. Long black hair draped over his shoulders from under his matching helmet. A small silver wyvern wing was stamped on the left shoulder of his armor. It was Commander Larkus Brove, the man who discharged Aaron from the Galvanian army. Dun, dun, dun!